Hi, it's Dr. Saira, and welcome back for Therapist Thursdays. Today I want to talk about something that's a little bit different than what we've been doing the last few weeks. Childhood trauma. Not the topic you were expecting, but a really, really important topic, and let me tell you why. The thing about childhood trauma that you might not know is that it doesn't have to, when we think of the words childhood trauma, we think of some really bad thing that happened, like we were abducted into a cult, right? Or we lived through a war, or there was some intense abuse, physical, sexual abuse, or we were like locked in, I don't know. These are the things I think about, like locked in a basement by, a bad guy, and then they like fed you food through that. Like those are the kinds of things, that you see in movies that when you think of like kids who are really disturbed, those are the kinds of images that come to mind. But the childhood trauma that we talk about in mainstream mental health actually isn't that. There's a study called the ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And what they did was they looked at, a huge group of adults, and they measured their physical health issues as adults, and they compared that to, or they kind of correlated that to what kind of childhood they had. And what they found was that people with more incidences of more traumatic moments or more traumatic events in their childhood, they tended to have worse physical health 30 and 40 years later. And we've known this, like mental health professionals have known this, that your psychological experiences affect your body. But now, so exciting, we have proof. I mean, it's not a new study, but it's finally coming into the mainstream. And so what is an adverse childhood experience? So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about this kind of trauma. So one of those could be something like divorce, shouting and fighting between parents in the home, losing a best friend at a young age, or having to move and not really fitting into the new place that you're coming into. It could be a really, really like a drawn out childhood illness, or another person in the house being really, really ill while you're a child. It could be the death of a loved one. And here's the thing, like most kids are going to go through some of these experiences, right? Now, some kids will just go through them and it'll be okay. They'll be okay. They have that resilience. And part of that is because of how they're parented. Part of that is biological. There's a whole bunch of factors. And some kids will look like they get through it, but what they've actually done is they've buried it away. And I often use the analogy of the banana box, right? And so it's like, here's life, gives you this banana, and it's ripe, and it's ready to eat, and this is the problem that you have to solve. And if you solve it right now, you'll be fine. But what we do is we don't have the time or the know-how, and so we take that banana, we put it in a box. And then the next banana shows up, the next problem, the next stressor, and we put it in the box, we put it in the box. We keep piling up these bananas into our box. And at some point as adults, we start noticing that there's this like weird stench in our lives, and we're not sure why. And that's where personal development, therapy, self-reflection, that's where these things come in, because we realize that there's all of these experiences that we've had that we haven't really dealt with that are rotting, right? And they're actually impacting us. The thing that I want to tell you about childhood trauma is even if something happened once, it can impact you for the rest of your life. So even if you were only smacked once, your parent, was really kind and loving, and then one time they smacked you across the face, well, that's going to stay with you. And you might say, oh, but other kids had it so much worse than I did. Yeah, but you had a parent that you could trust, and suddenly they smacked you across the face, and that's a betrayal, right? That's a betrayal. And that sits with children, and that forms the way that that forms our brain pretty much, and it forms the way that we're going to relate to others. And so there'll always be this question in the back of that person's mind about, are you going to turn on me, right? Are you going to turn on me? And so many of us have experienced childhood trauma. At least the people who watch my videos, they can relate, right? You've probably experienced some of these things, and maybe you dealt with it at the time. Maybe you had the tools. Maybe your parents were really present for you, and they knew what to do when these things happened. They actually talked to you like you were people and considered your emotions. Just the other day, I was having a chat with my son, right? And it's a normal thing. His friends, he has friends who are in older grades than him, and they're moving on to high school, and he's still in elementary school, and he was really sad about that. He was sad about the school year ending and not getting to see his friends, and they're moving on. And that's a normal part of going through childhood. That's not a trauma. But if he had no one to talk to about it, it becomes a trauma. If he had no one to talk to about it, that's when it becomes a trauma, because then you have all of these emotions and you don't know what to do with them and no one's guiding you through that. And so you put it inside into that box. And so the thing about childhood trauma is if you don't look at it, if you don't work on it, if you don't acknowledge and heal it, those things stay with you. And what happens is you pass them on to your kids. Your children actually inherit your banana box as their gift of life. So for those of us who are interested in being better for ourselves, for our kids, for the next generation, it's time to open up that banana box and start working through it. And it's not an easy thing to do, and it's not something you necessarily want to do alone, right? This is somewhere where you enlist help, whether that's a good friend or family member, whether if it's more serious and maybe a mental health professional, maybe you do some courses or learn or books or whatever it is, for you to start healing some of that stuff from the past, because it'll come up when you least expect it. So to let you know a couple of other projects that I'm working on that are kind of linked to this, I do have a guided meditation out, and that one specifically is a good one when you're looking at childhood trauma and the things that you didn't have the bandwidth to deal with then that now you're ready to look at. That's a great meditation. It's free. It's in the link below. There's also a women's group that I hold every Saturday online, and that is open, it's free, and it's for women who live with depression and anxiety. It's a support group. So if that's something that you think would be beneficial, there's a link on how to connect to that in the whatever below. And I'm taking on clients as well. There's lots of different things. So if you want to stay connected, if you want to be part of this group of like-minded people that's kind of gathering around me, let me know. Leave a comment below. And also, if you could leave a comment below about the experience that you had as a child that you didn't think was a big deal until recently, and recently you realized, oh, that was a big deal. That would be really interesting to see what it is for all of us. Whether it was that, your friend moving on to another grade and you didn't have anyone to tell. So those are my thoughts. Thank you for joining me for Therapist Thursday, and I'll see you next week. Bye.